Okay, good afternoon and good morning to ladies and gentlemen, faculty members, students in Jakarta and Toulouse. Welcome to our webinar with the topic of the French and European industrial policy response to COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Dewi Tamara from Jakarta, and I will be accompanied with Naomi from Toulouse, and I will be your host. We will be your hosts for this session. Okay. Well, since we are all here, we take a photo, right? And then after that, we will start the session. Okay, you can open the video. So we can
like
have—
to see your lovely faces, everybody.
Yes. Okay, we have 3 times here. Let me arrange for the first. Okay, we have here. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, this one is the first session. Yeah, the first page. Okay. This is the second one. Okay, please open the video so we can see you. We have 20,000 kilometers apart, but we here with the Zoom. Okay, everybody open?
Yep.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, last one. I go to the third montage. Okay, so, okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, very good. Okay, everyone. So before I begin, I would like to explain the rules for the Q&A session. Please type your question in the chat box and indicate which speakers that you would like to answer, and we will inform you about this later. And we will address your question in the Q&A session, yeah, except for Fang Sang. Okay, among us already present in the Zoom, Madame Louise Courant from Toulouse Business School, Monsieur Vincent Ossiu from French government, and Monsieur Gilles Merrick from Airbus, and also Ms. Naomi Lockley from International Office, Toulouse Business School. Also present here, Ms. Rini Setiawati as the Dean of the BINUS Business School Indonesia, and Mr. Willy Gunadi as the Program Director. Our agenda today will begin with the opening speech from Ms. Rini Setiawati, following with Madame Louise and Fang Sang and Gilles. Okay, without further ado, please welcome Ms. Rini Setiawati for the opening speech. Ms. Rini, Bu Rini, the time and stage are yours.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Dewi Tamara. Good afternoon, everybody in Jakarta. Welcome to our webinar. And also good morning to all the panelists. We have Dr. Louis Kurang here. We have Mr. Vincent Osiu, Mr. Jill Merrick, and also Ms. Naomi Lockley from TBS International Office. Welcome to this webinar. And on behalf of BINUS Business School, I would like also to extend my greatest appreciation to Toulouse Business School for collaborating with us, arranging this webinar with us so that it's kind of like part of international collaboration program. And also for all the panelists, thank you for giving your precious time to share your knowledge to our students. Okay, the plan was actually we got a plan to go to Toulouse with our students. However, due to the pandemic, so we have to postpone and switch it to online platform. But regardless, hope that all the objective of this program will be fulfilled. Actually, to bring or to provide international experience to students and faculty members, also to align or to have a better collaboration with partners. So finally, I hope that this webinar will be beneficial for our students and serve as a stepping stone toward a better or fruitful collaboration between BINUS, Toulouse Business School, and also French business community. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the webinar. Please, Ibu Dewi.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Madam Rini. Thank you for your welcome. And we are very, very delighted to have to be hosting this conference for your students, and also welcome to the TBS students who have joined us this morning. I have to say as well that I wanted to try out Selamat Pagi to all of you. My pronunciation is maybe awful, but anyway, I wanted to try the only word of Indonesian that I know. So
Very good. Bonjour.
So welcome to everybody. I'm just going to highlight our there's three speakers. Just give a quick rundown. So Dr. Louise Curran, she's a senior lecturer at TBS and has been for the last 13 years. She received her PhD from Manchester Met in the UK, and her research interests are in particular government policy and trade and investment flows, which is why we asked her to talk today and help us organise this conference. Dr. Vincent Osido is actually director of the Economie Finance department at France Stratégie, the French government think tank, and has a doctorate from the University of Montpellier, and also worked in a number of different posts within the French government, but also in the British Ministry for Business, Innovation and Skills. And Mr. Gilles Merrick is actually a TBS alumni from 1980 from the Master of Management program, and has been subsidiaries director and CFO at Airbus for the last 13 years, in addition to a total of 30 years within the Airbus company. So all of you, thank you so much for joining us today. We're delighted to listen to all of your experience and knowledge that you are willing to share with all of our audience. And we are delighted to say we are currently at 60 participants. So that's a great number from across the world right now. So I'm going to hand over to Louise now without further ado, but thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And just to let you know, we are doing a recording of this. If anybody wishes to object or tell us that they want to have their names removed, then please let us know in the chat. So just as a reminder, all of the chat, if you want to put your questions in the chat on the right hand side, and we'll hand those out at the end. So handing over to you, Louise. Thank you very much.
Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm not very tech savvy, so apologies if things go wrong from time to time. You can see okay?
Yes.
Yes,
I
okay,
think
cool.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. Okay. Morning, afternoon. As Naomi says, I'm a lecturer on international business in the school. My key concern now for many years in terms of my research has been globalization, understanding the way in which public policy impacts on globalization and global value chains. And I was working already for some time before COVID on rising protectionism and the impact of that on multinational companies and on global value chains. And then we were hit by COVID, and the public policy responses were many and varied, but they included trade policy responses. So I've been particularly looking at those in the short term. And then as government responses evolved from immediate to more long-term policy orientations, I've been looking at the impact of these for companies, for global value chains, and for globalization more widely. Like we see increasing think pieces and opinion pieces in the international press and on blogs and some academic work starting to come out, talking about deglobalization, rolling back globalization, reshoring. And I've been working a bit on that kind of space to think about, well, what are the long-term implications of the policy responses to COVID for companies and for their global value chains and for globalization more generally. So does this work? Okay, how do I actually get this to go forward? This is the problem I have now. Woo! Okay. So more generally, we're in Europe, obviously, and Europe, as you know, has been extremely badly hit by the crisis. The latest figures from the European Centre for Disease Control are bad. Over 10 million cases, over 250,000 deaths. And of course, we know that that's not the end of it. So Europe has been extremely badly hit, both by the first and the second wave. So obviously the public policy responses in Europe have been extensive and widespread. So in the first wave, most European countries locked down, which basically meant that all non-essential businesses closed, all schools closed in most countries. Basically, we stayed at home for 2 months, which, at least in France, and in Ireland even longer, actually. By the way, I'm Irish, which explains my accent and the fact that I speak too quickly. So I have 2 references in terms of the lockdowns, and the impacts on the economies in those 2 countries were extensive. Now we're in the second wave, where, as you probably know, France is again in lockdown, slightly less intensive lockdown, but nevertheless having quite major economic impacts, particularly on the hospitality industry and other non-essential services. So initially, when COVID first hit Europe, the forecasts were bad, but there was an assumption that we would pass through it relatively quickly. By July, that assumption had disappeared, and the forecast was for a quite major 8.3% reduction in GDP. I think it's fair to say that that's probably been overtaken by events as well. So we know that Europe will be heavily hit, that the economy will be heavily hit, and that we're operating below capacity, 25 to 30% below capacity during the first confinement. So from a public policy point of view, what governments are trying to do is to keep that capacity so that when the economy starts to operate effectively again, that capacity is still there. And so a lot of public policy responses have been about retaining our industries and ensuring that that capacity is ready for when the economy wakes up again, as it were. I've done a lot of work because trade policy is my thing. I've done a lot of work on the short-term policy responses on the trade policy side. I think the other speakers are going to talk more about the policy responses on supporting the industry side. So I'm just going to share some of the work I've been doing here. One of the most clear and evident problems which occurred from the very beginning, really, when COVID started to hit Europe and elsewhere, was the fact that governments had not anticipated such a major global pandemic with global implications for demand for basic equipment like personal protective equipment, masks, ventilators. So very rapidly, it became evident that essential workers were not being protected because there was a lack of access to this equipment. That caused, of course, public outcry around the world. And the public policy response in several countries, including in Europe, was to ban export, to keep national supplies as much as possible. In Europe, that evolved relatively quickly towards a European restriction, where companies were required to get a license for exporting vital medical goods. And actually, in retrospect, relatively few licenses were refused, but obviously that reduced trade. In other countries, exports of PPE and ventilators and other medical goods were banned. And in many countries, they still are. Bans are pretty unusual in the international trading system. They're the last resort, really, for members of the WTO. They agree in principle not to ban trade. But of course, there are exceptions. And one of the exceptions is the health requirements of your population. So we've been looking with a couple of colleagues, a colleague in the University of York and a law professor in Korea, at these different restrictions over the last few months. These are the latest figures on the 10th of November. I looked again at this database. It's the International Trade Center in Geneva that uses a variety of different sources to track what's going on in terms of restrictions. Sorry, somebody's microphone is on and I'm not quite sure whose. It's
please continue.
Yeah, okay. So we've been looking at the types of restrictions, the extent to which there were bans or not. As I say, bans are the most problematic in a sense because it's the most extreme trade policy response from governments. As you can see, most of the restrictions are in medical products and they are clearly covered by the exceptions in WTO. Sorry, I should explain. The HI is high income, UMI is upper middle income, LMI is lower middle income, and LDC is least developed countries. So basically we characterize the countries by their status in the World Bank. I noticed that Indonesia has just changed status actually from a lower middle income to an upper middle income, which means I have to change my, my calculations because until quite recently, it was a lower middle income. But what you can see is that medical devices were the most affected. Food was also affected because very rapidly governments start to get concerned about whether they can feed their population. First of all, we worry about protecting our essential workers and our population from the virus. And then they started to worry about, well, if people can't go out, if farmers can't go out into the fields and reap their crops, we'll have a problem also of food security. So rapidly, governments started to think about food security and some started to ban particularly exports of food. Whether that's really related to the pandemic is an open question, but you could consider it to be related to the major needs of the population in terms of the World Trade Organization rules. What's much more problematic is the other category. So several countries in response to COVID-19 have banned or restricted exports and imports in products like cement, used clothing, timber, cigarettes, products which you couldn't imagine would be that incredibly related to fighting the pandemic. And so these are the things that we were concerned about. We've written a paper with my colleagues Jape and Yemen on this issue, on the potential long-term impacts of these policy interventions on the global trading system. Because there are rules. When members join the WTO, they sign up to certain rules. And it seems to us that the COVID pandemic has been used as an excuse to some extent by some countries to restrict trade in ways which we don't think are WTO compatible. So from the point of view of multinational enterprises working in the global economy, it means it's a much more uncertain context than it has been up to now. And of course, it calls into question the authority of the World Trade Organization, particularly at a time when the US administration, hopefully which will change very soon, was already undermining the WTO by refusing to appoint judges to their dispute settlement system. So that's the global context. Major trade policy interventions and major reductions in trade because of them and because of the pandemic, of course. In the more sort of medium and long term, Europe has been looking at how to rebuild, to build back better is one of the sort of key objectives. we have lots of money that's going to be used to try to rebuild the economy and recreate a next generation EU, as they call it. Lots of zeros. They brought out the big guns in terms of finance because, of course, the impact had been major. So money for rebuilding Europe, support for unemployment assistance, which is, of course, much more short-term and medium-term, because many member states have had to really ramp up hugely their unemployment support. Support for the most affected sectors. Obviously, these are sectors like tourism, transport. They've been impacted in different kind of ways, depending on the context. For example, in the region I live in France, it's a very touristy region. Of course, there was no tourists during the lockdown. And then during the summer, because French people could move, but they couldn't really go anywhere else because of the remaining COVID restrictions, we actually had a huge boom in tourism in the region. So tourism has been hit in some regions more intensively than in others. And I know that, of course, Indonesia is extremely dependent on tourism. And I'd be very interested to have some feedback from the people there about how that sector is coping there. Europe has quite strong rules on state aid, on how much companies can give, or countries can give to companies. They've had to be relaxed because of the pandemic. So they've increased the limits on that. And there's also concerns in Europe and elsewhere, of course, that companies which have been fragilized by the pandemic will become vulnerable to hostile takeovers from outside, and that Europe could lose some of its strategic knowledge, industry, technology, because of this fragilization. So the European Union has been providing guidelines to member states on dealing with that. In terms of the future, and this is where I'm working at the moment, trying to think about what in the long term all of this means for Europe. It's still very much a work in progress. It's still very much a debate, which is why it's interesting. The most affected sectors are continuing to be supported, of course, and will continue to be so in the medium term. But there's also a very active debate on how we can use the pandemic as an opportunity. People always say crisis are potentially an opportunity, and many politicians are trying to see it like that. An opportunity to rebuild back better, to reorientate the economy towards a more sustainable model. And of course, what exactly that means is part of the debate. So there is concern about the importance of ensuring that Europe is competitive in the key sectors for the future. I've listed some of them there: artificial intelligence, 5G, storage of electricity, of course, as we move away from fossil fuels, renewable energy, and of course, now, public health, ensuring that Europe can be at the forefront of public health needs. There is a lot of discussion about what exactly are these strategic industries. And of course, an organization like France Strategy would also be very active in considering these questions. What exactly is strategic? What exactly are the industries that Europe should be focusing on? I think will be quite an interesting political debate as we move forward. Some are fairly clear, others are maybe less so. There's also a concern about the supply chains which Europe relies on. And the key term which is coming up again and again is resilience. That European politicians are concerned that we saw in COVID the lack of resilience of many supply chains for Europe, because as trade basically ground to a halt, also our economies ground to a halt in some sectors because we didn't have the key raw materials and the key inputs in order to keep them going. So there is a discussion about ensuring resilience, what kind of key raw materials Europe needs to ensure that they can rapidly access either locally or within the region. And another key area of debate is this context of open strategic autonomy. What exactly open strategic autonomy means is an open question. But this is the objective in terms of trade policy, in terms of wider European policies, to remain open, but to ensure that we retain our autonomy. And this is going to be quite a challenge. The balance between autonomy, being autonomous, ensuring that we have access to the key goods that we need without relying too much on the rest of the world, but avoiding protectionism. And this is going to be something of a debate internally in Europe. And I'm sure it will also be a debate with our external partners as they watch what's going on, including, of course, Indonesia. Within the member states of the European Union, you may know we are 27 member states in Europe. They have quite different interests and are quite different sizes and economic structures. My own country, Ireland, is a small open economy. They are actually quite concerned, and have made it known at a European level that they're quite concerned about these discussions about autonomy, that they're concerned it might start to become more like protectionism. And of course, from their point of view, as a small country that cannot possibly ensure all of its own needs autonomously, they are worried. The French are much more enthusiastic about a more strategic approach to international trade and to industrial policy more generally. And I'm very interested to see what Vincent has to say about that, because of course France is a key member state that is very important in this discussion. So their objectives and their strategic orientation will, I think, be vital to how Europe decides to develop in this area. So this is the current context. The future of globalization for Europe, I think, is at the moment still a question mark. Of course, we will continue to be global and have global value chains and be integrated with the global economy, but exactly how widespread that will be, whether there will be a rollback in certain value chains, whether European governments want to secure this strategic autonomy in a wide range of industries or just a few, and how exactly that would operate are still questions which are up for debate, and which I'll be following over the next couple of years, because I think it's a very interesting area of policy, and the impacts on global companies, I think, could be potentially major. The fact that Biden has arrived in the White House, hopefully, does indicate a change of direction for the American administration, which hopefully will mean that the global trading system becomes a little bit more stable. But some of the criticisms of globalization, which have just been magnified by the pandemic, have not gone away. And so we will be operating in a more, in a less supportive context for globalization for global companies, and they will need to develop strategies to deal with that context. So I'm going to pass on to Vincent now. Thank you for your patience. I shall stop doing my arrêté, voila, and pass over to you, Vincent. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello to everybody. Just want to say a few words, maybe Indonesia. So, selamat sore pada semua. Saya pernah tinggal setahun di Semarang, Jawa Tengah. Senang sekali hari ini kita bicara dengan semua. I'm going to switch back to English because, of course, my Indonesian is a bit rusty. But I'm really happy to be with you today virtually. So I'll start by saying a few words about France Stratégie institution. Oh yeah, that's working. So France Stratégie is a public think tank. We are part of the Prime Minister administration. We are basically an institution founded in 1946 by General de Gaulle called the Commissariat Général du Plan, the planning agency. Jean Monnet was the first commissioner of the planning agency. And it was originally the institution appointed to be the contact point for the Marshall Plan after World War II. And it played a key role in modernizing France after war to rebuild the country, basically. More recently, in 2006, the Prime Minister transformed the institution into the Center for Strategic Analysis. And then in 2030, the French Prime Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault created France Stratégie, so the new institution with basically a new role to help the government define its policy. And so, of course, the new role of the institution is to basically reinforce policies geared towards potential growth with a view to the necessary reforms in all the field of public policies. It's in social policies, economics, environmental, and one of the responsibility of France Stratégie is to deal with major social changes such as aging population, the digital revolution, ecological transition, geographic challenges, and of course, one important point is to build a consensus to debate around the reforms and the evaluation of public policies. Of course, as every country, France is facing significant challenges. We have to strengthen our competitiveness to reindustrialize the country. There are questions around the sustainability of the French social model, and we have also social, generational, geographic, and identity-related rifts running through the society. And like every other country, we have to deal with environmental challenges, of course, climate change, but also the reduction of biodiversity and the increasing part of the artificial land, the artificialization of land. So we need to reform public policies. And for that, it's really important to evaluate and assess the quality of the current public policies and to define possible options. So the new approach that we have developed is to basically build a consensus. So of course it's difficult to build a consensus, but it's important to concert, it's important to discuss and debate with all stakeholders, in particular social partners. So the role of France Stratégie now is to basically evaluate public policies in the medium term, to promote innovation and a culture of public policy based on facts, to build trust and consensus around shared assessments of the situation of the country, and to define the options for change, the potential reforms, the way forward that we would suggest for the country. So let me turn now to the consequences of the pandemic and the measures which have been implemented. Basically, first as emergency measures. So the French government has implemented an evolving set of measures for the first and second waves with three key measures. First, to finance partial activity and the solidarity fund for companies with an impact on the public budget, a bit more than 57 million up to now. The deferral of tax and social security contributions, and of course, the amount is close to 80 billion today, but its impact on public balance will be much lower, of course, because companies are soon to be able to pay back when the economy will be back on track. The third sort of type of measures are the state-granted loans and the credit insurance, with the guarantees now reaching a level of close to 330 billion euros, close to 15% of GDP. So that's the emergency measures. To get into more details, one of the key schemes is the short-time work schemes, where basically the state reimburse 70% of the gross salary of employees for salaries up to close to 7,000 euros per month. And close to 17 million employees have been into a short-time work scheme at least once between March and November, for an amount of 20 billion, basically paid by the government to the companies to pay the salaries, for an amount of 1,900 million hours work. So a lot of the workforce had to be basically in the work scheme, the short-time work scheme. So for the loan, the state loan guarantees, it's an amount of 120 billion, which have already been approved. And on top of that, 12 billion for large companies. For the Solidarity Fund, so aimed at small and very small companies and some medium-sized and large companies, it's already 6.5 billion already disbursed for 4.7 million companies, so mainly small and very small companies. For the tax deferral, it's 20 billion and a bit less than 300,000 companies benefiting from it. In terms of deferral of social security contributions, we are close to 23 billion euros as costs, as basically the amount of the defaults in social security contribution. For the recovery plan, which has been announced recently and which is already for some parts being implemented, there are at least three sort of stages. First, the short-term support to support activity through public investment measures, and also to strengthen the investment capacities of companies, avoid loss of skills and loss of income, including for the most precarious people, minimize the number of bankruptcies and support to financial health of companies. Then the second chapter is more focused on addressing structural challenges to stimulate innovation and productivity, to enhance France's economic competitiveness, to support employment and facilitate career transitions, to develop skills and strengthen social and territorial cohesion, to ensure the decarbonation of the economy. Then the third objective is to transform over the long term the economy by accelerating the ecological transition, by fostering the digital transformation of the companies, and by strengthening the resilience of our economy. So the recovery plan is organized along three different categories. First, measures to foster and to protect the environment, with 6.7 billion aimed at thermal retrofitting, 1.2 billion aimed at industry decarbonation, 3.2 billion for biodiversity, the fight against land artificialization, to promote circular economy, short circuits for food, agricultural transition, and to protect sea life and the oceans. 8.6 billion for green infrastructures and mobility modes, around the same amount, a bit less on green technologies, and 2.5 billion for the investment bank, French investment bank, Bpifrance, on climate plan. The second chapter of the recovery plan is aimed at promoting French competitiveness with an amount of 34 billion euro, with 20 billion in reduction of taxes on businesses, 20 billion over 2 years. It's a 10 billion measure annually. There is also the objective of strengthening the equity capital of SMEs and very small enterprise, as well as mid-sized companies. There is also close to 7 billion aimed at preserving technological sovereignty and promoting the resilience of the country in case of basically disruption of supply chain. The digital upgrading of the states and also local authorities and companies, it's around 2 billion. 2.7 billion of export support, the support for cultural activities, and also to buy some new military equipment. Then the last chapter of the recovery plan is the objective of promoting cohesion with 36 billion. First of measures to safeguard employment, to promote youth training and access to jobs. There's also 2 billion for vocational training, around 3 billion for R&D, public and private one, and also 6 billion for measures to strengthen the health system, investments, and to basically work on reducing dependency of elderly people, well, not reducing their dependency, but financing help for dependent elderly people. And also around 9.5 billion and in the envelope for territorial cohesion. So basically, this is money for local authorities, regions and cities and rural areas for investments and basically also social cohesion. And around 1 billion to support people in precarious situation, disabled people, and also promote health cooperation between public and private sector in the health, for health services. So we've been working on the trying to assess the impacts over the medium term of the this recovery plan. So the estimates basically conclude that but it was basically done before the second wave. So maybe now the results will be a little bit different, and but the plan was designed to restore as soon as 2022 the level of economic activity of 2019. So now will be probably a bit late, and but depending on the economic consequences of the current wave, which is basically still uncertain in terms of economic impact. This recovery plan would add 1.5 additional growth to French GDP in 2021. That's the estimate, and around 160,000 additional jobs in 2021 as well, with a reduction of CO2 emissions by around 57 million tons, but also the reduction of the carbon footprint, so the imported CO2 emissions. And there are some benefits for the environment, which are of course difficult to evaluate, but it was, as I said, one of the objectives of the plan to protect biodiversity, the reduction of risks, and to get a better control over pollution. So I will stop here, and we'll open the floor to questions. I'm happy to answer to the questions you may have.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vincent. So we have a question for you
to
from
have more
Richie.
info on strategy activity. Yeah.
Perfect. So we have a question for you from Richie. The recovery plan described has three main themes, which are first, supporting the workforce and ensuring they don't lose their job. Second, fostering investment and economic advantages. And third, accelerating ecological transition. In your opinion, is it favorable to focus on surviving the first point and expanding the second point at the same time. So surviving the supporting the workforce and ensuring they don't lose their job, and expanding, fostering investment and economic advantages. And I realize that this is a short-term support. So how would this translate into mid-long-term recovery plan? Thank you. Sorry, it was a bit long. I can start again if you
want. I'll start to answer, basically, this was one of the main challenges, of course, is to basically protect the jobs and the economy in the short term, and at the same time promote the transformation of the economy toward a green economy. And that was the main challenge. The main challenge, basically, and that's on this to basically solve this equation that we've been working for months to basically design that recovery plan. And it is actually possible, basically, because, for example, by financing additional training for employees, for the workforce, for young people, you can help basically develop the jobs in the new part, in the sort of new sectors linked
so
to.
We've lost your sound. Can you just try, maybe just check it for us?
Sorry, you can't hear me, or can you hear me?
I can hear him.
Yes,
I can hear.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, just on there is no contradiction between protecting jobs and protecting companies, and at the same time helping them to move into the direction of being more protective of the environment. For example, there are large, basically, measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from companies to house insulation, and for all these activities, we need people to be new workers and people to be trained for these type of jobs. And so investments now in the short term in basically in training, in helping people to basically learn new skills. It's actually all very coherent to help the economy move in that direction. Of course, by supporting the economy, basically the emissions, greenhouse gas emissions are still high, but we are not going to basically reduce greenhouse gas emission by killing the economy. This is something that won't work at the end. People won't accept. And so it's better to basically try to build new sectors, new jobs on the objective of greening the economy. For example, investment in hydrogens and in electricity storage, in transforming the mobility, for example, with electric vehicles. All that require a lot of investment, and that's precisely now the time for investing and to basically at the same time support the recovery and also the modernization of the economy and the transformation into something into an economic system which is less harmful for the environment.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Fang Sang. So there is another question for you from Pak Iman Simon from Indonesia. First, understand that the recovery plan is made as strategic decision from the government. How does France government get the source of fund? Does France government run similar quantitative easing method like US government? And the second one, what do you think about the 2021 outlook amidst the competition for economy recovery and vaccine discovery?
So for the first question, yes, well, we have a common currency, of course, in Europe, the euro, and the quantitative easing policy is being pursued by the European Central Bank for several years now, since basically the financial crisis. Now the central bank has increased its quantitative easing policy, and basically money for the recovery plan come from borrowing right now. And there is a large debate, of course, going on in France on how we are going to reimburse that debt. Should we reimburse that debt? And so, of course, this is, I mean, basic economic principle is that when you are going through an economic downturn, it's time to spend for public money to basically stabilize the economy. Otherwise, you go through an even deeper downturn, and the destruction of the economy is even bigger, and the loss of resources. So there's an important role for public money to stabilize the economy, which is the main objective, of course, of the emergency measures and the recovery plan. When the economy will be back on track, of course, we will have to pay back for the additional public debt that we are currently creating. Of course, the whole context is easier due to the fact that the European Central Bank is having a very pro-growth monetary policy, and is helping all member states of the European Union to go through the crisis without basically having a rise in interest rates. So yes, the monetary policy is very helping at the moment, and has been so for the last decade. And at some point, we'll have to, of course, when growth will be back, to come back to a more normal monetary policy. I'm not sure I got the second question. Could you repeat the second question?
Okay. So the second one, what do you think about the outlook for 2021 amidst regardless the competition for economy recovery and vaccine discovery?
Well, the economic outlook for next year is relatively good so far. Of course, with a lot of uncertainty regarding the current pandemic's second wave that France and Europe are going through, basically. But the forecasts, based on what happened after the first wave and the fact that the economy should start very quickly and more basically it started to grow again faster than what was anticipated. So the forecast for next year is around 6 percent GDP growth, again against around the 9 or 10 GDP fall in 2020, which is the current forecast. So of course we would not have basically got back to the growth level of 2019 before 2021, which is the ambition. It's probably, sorry, 2022. It's probably more likely to be in 2023 that we'll get back to the GDP level of 2019, given the size of the economic downturn. But given the specificities of this crisis, where basically it is a first sanitary crisis, and this is because of the sanitary pandemic that there is this lockdown. We stopped the economy, but the economic infrastructure, basically, and companies so far, and if it's not lasting too long, there's not been very much destruction of basically the production system so far. So the anticipation is that the economy will be able to get back on track if, of course, there's a lot of uncertainty about how many waves are we going to go through still. But if in early 2021 the pandemic is over, then basically the forecast is that the economy will be back on track in the mid 21.
Okay, thank you. Last question from Luis. How can we reinforce resilience and sorry, there is another one. Okay, how we can reinforce the resilience and technological sovereignty in this case?
It's here the main question is not to depend on too few sources for key equipments and key components. So basically, the answer is in the diversity of sources of basically supply of the equipments and components. So this is something which basically we can work on. It's not a question of producing everything in Europe. It's a question of basically not being dependent on only one country for the production, for example, of some specific drugs, on some specific telecom equipment, energy equipment, and all this. So basically, what we are doing now is basically pinpointing some specific components and equipment where the world and Europe and France are dependent on only very few suppliers, and trying to figure out how to basically increase the number of suppliers. So it's not a question of repatriating the production on the European continent. It's more a question of making sure that we have enough suppliers and not all concentrated in the same country, because we have experienced before the pandemic some situation where basically for a key component all the suppliers were in the same country, and sometime with a natural disaster, for example, or the Fukushima accident, we have experienced the fact that for key components, basically it can be very problematic when the supply of one component is basically stopped because there is no other suppliers in the world. So it's a question of diversifying the sources.
Okay, thank you. One last question for Vincent from Ronaldo Gontung from Indonesia. So in the midst of economic recession now, how would you suggest that the Indonesian government to still pay attention on green technologies and industry decarbonation, especially on electrical field? Meanwhile, many other sectors are needed government support in the first place. Thank you.
So yeah, I think Indonesia, as many other countries, is facing a lot of challenges in terms of greening the economy. One of the key, of course, challenge for the country is to preserve the biodiversity and to preserve the forests because they are very important greenhouse gas pits, and this is absolutely key for humanity. So, and in terms of electricity production, in terms of energy production, of course, Indonesia is a very important oil producer, and so of course it's a very difficult challenge to move toward more environmentally friendly energy sources. I think at the same time, Indonesia has so many natural resources, including solar energy, wind energy, and also maritime energy kind of. So I believe, but of course I'm not a specialist of energy production in Indonesia, but I believe you have a new field where the country can invest and develop new technologies, new companies to basically produce green energy based on natural resources while preserving the environment. So this is in a way potential for new growth, new jobs, and also developing new technologies. And now that Indonesia has the capacity also to develop that, and thanks also to other Asian countries around, which are basically leaders in some very advanced technologies to produce green energy. So there is a possibility to do it. Of course, it will basically need a lot of investments. Part of it can be public investments, but also private companies could invest in this field, given the natural resources of Indonesia.
Okay, thank you very much, Vincent. The question is stop, yeah. Okay, Naomi, can we move to Gilles?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, obviously we understand, Vincent, that you have to go. So thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for answering all of these questions. There's some really good questions, everyone, and loads of other questions coming in through as well for Louise and everyone else. So merci beaucoup de la part de TBS et de BINUS, and we hope you have a great day. We'll also send you through any comments that we get as well in the next few hours. Okay.
Thank you very much,
Terima
Sansa.
kasih sekali.
See you around. Merci
Sampai
beaucoup.
jumpa.
Bye bye.
Merci. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Gilles, so the floor is open for you. I don't know if you can still hear us. I haven't seen you in a while. Ah, there you are. Perfect. I think your mic's off. If you want to just switch that on.
Yes,
Perfect. Okay.
it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay now. Okay.
We can hear you.
So okay. So I will do a short presentation first of all of Airbus, just for everybody to know exactly who is Airbus, and I won't be long on that. I will be quite short on this presentation, on this corporate presentation, and then I will go directly to the topic which is interesting us. So I want to thank Vincent, because it was very interesting, and I heard I discover a lot of things that maybe I don't know in detail, and the fact to have it in perspective was very interesting. Of course, in Airbus, and I will have the opportunity to develop that, we are using a lot of the help that French and globally European government are offering the industry to try to recover from this huge crisis, and this is very opportunistic for us to benefit from this. So just in some word, you see well my screen. You see all the elements that are on the screen now.
Yes.
Okay, fine. So just to give a perspective on aviation, aviation, I would say, drives our global economy. Up to now, it means before the crisis, the air traffic doubles every 15 years. And this is an important figure on which I will come back after. So this is a very important thing. There is a huge development of air traffic, especially in the Asian region, which is one of the most dynamic part of the world for the time being. And this represents yearly 4.1 billion passengers. It represents as well, and this is also a point on which I will come back, 65.5 million jobs supported, directly and indirectly. And also, it's in this period of time, or with the pandemic, freight was very important. It represents 62 million tons of freight yearly, and globally, $2.4 trillion, which is a significant part of the global GDP annually. If we go to what Airbus represent, Airbus is mainly Airbus Commercial, so it's a commercial aircraft manufacturer with two main divisions, depending also on this company, which is Airbus Defence and Space and Airbus Helicopter. So I will focus my presentation on Airbus Commercial, because in any case, in the COVID-19 period, the most affected part of Airbus was Airbus Commercial, and you can easily understand why. So globally, Airbus is 135,000 people all over the world. It's an order book of $471 billion up to now, and it's an annual revenue of roughly 70 billion euro globally. If we detail what Airbus commercial aircraft represent, for the time being, it's more than 7,000 commercial aircraft in backlog that we have to produce in the, I would say, the 9 or 10 next year, because we have that time frame for the time being. We have more than 400 operators. Operator means airlines, globally speaking, or sometimes private owner as well. Airbus Commercial represent 81,000 employees, which is more than 60% of the global Airbus group. And the turnover of Airbus Commercial is roughly 55 billion euro, which is roughly 78% of Airbus, globally speaking. So these are some figures which are recent figures. The figure of global revenue on the 55 is related to 2019. If you are interested and if you have some question, I can highlight some figures on what were the Q3 result in Airbus, but I don't want to focus on figure. I do prefer to come back to the crisis afterwards. So in terms of, I would say, commercial footprint of Airbus, we have sold since the beginning of Airbus more than 20,000 aircraft, and it means that up to now, it was 37,000 flights per day, and the number of planes delivered was above 13,000 aircraft. So it means that if we want to have a picture, up to the beginning of the crisis, one Airbus takes off and land every 1.2 seconds. So you imagine what was the shock afterwards when a huge part of the worldwide fleet was totally grounded. So in Airbus, I see, I already said that we have a lot of different people. We have more than 100 nationality in our people. So this is quite wide, and we have a global footprint. We are located, of course, in Asia, including in Indonesia. We have a subsidiary in Jakarta for the time being, but we are also located in in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Thailand, in Vietnam, in China, in India, in Philippines, in South Korea, in Japan. So we have a very important presence in Asia, globally speaking. Two main family of aircraft: the single-aisle family with the tiny one, the 220, on two versions, the Dash 100 and the Dash 300, and after that the 320, I would say, family, which with the 319, 320, and 321. The difference between these three type of plane is the length and the capacity of the fuselage. So the number of passengers that we can carry. Wide-body family, two types of aircraft, 330 and 350, with, once again, two different versions. When a company, when an airline prefer the capacity or the range. So this is the difference, the main difference between this type of aircraft. We have a lot of Airbus common family value, so, and especially the unique cockpit communality and the fly-by-wire control. We are dealing with the most advanced cabin, and this is clearly the desire to please our passenger, and this is something that we have permanently in mind. I will not detail the family. This will be in the presentation. Just to dream, this is a picture of the Airbus corporate jet aircraft that we also develop and sell, and we have more than 200 in service for the time being. What is important, and this is something on which we are focusing, especially in this difficult period, is the services. The services that we provide to all our customers 24 hours per day and 7 days a week. And this is clearly something that is very important for us, to be sure that we support flight operation, we support aircraft availability for our customer. We are also some huge commitment in the humanitarian relief. We have an Airbus Foundation which is dedicated to that topic, and we are globally, and this is linked to the first figure that I gave you previously, which is the fact that the air traffic double every 15 years. Up to now, and of course these figures will be reviewed in the following months and weeks, but up to now, for the next 20 years, and this analysis was shared also with our competitor, with engine manufacturer. The global evolution of the new number of aircraft to be delivered was around 40,000. So this is a very big number, which has to be reviewed, of course, taking into account the new situation and the crisis that is stopping this development. But that was the situation when we encountered the COVID crisis. This 40,000 represent globally $5 trillion in terms of service value, and 4.3% of traffic growth per year, which was leading to this doubling every 15 years. So this was the situation some months ago. This figure will evolve in the future, but we are quite confident in the future. We are also, and this is a strong part, and I've been very much interested by what Vincent told us about the support that the French government will give in decarbonation, in green and technology. We have already involved huge researches with the help, of course, of the engine manufacturer on the reduction of emission. It's evaluated for CO2 reduced by 80%, for NOx reduced by 90%, for noise also reduction by 75% in the next 25 years. What we want to insist upon as well, and it's why it's important that we share this vision. We have ambitions in that, especially to reduce fuel burn by 1.5 per year until 2020. We have also the volunteer to cap CO2 emission from 2020, and we want also to halve the level of 2005 CO2 emission by 2050. So sustainable growth, we want to be part of it. Incremental aviation, I heard something about electric support, and it's clear that in Airbus we are working on the more electrical plane, even to change the classical engine by in the future by electric engine. We had some research on that topic, and IFAN clearly was one of the examples that we had in the past. We want to be as well a technology enabler, so with connectivity, autonomy, and you have some very interesting image on the future autonomous flying taxi that we are on which we are working on. We want to connect people. We want to deliver value for the airlines. These are two of our mottos. So this is the end of the corporate presentation. I will switch to the COVID-19 presentation. And just to highlight, just to come back, what I want to detail very shortly with you. Once again, I will be quite short on the slide because there are many things on it, but I would prefer to leave the floor to questions. So what I want for us to detail is the immediate impact on the crisis on harbors. The main measure promoted by government, but this is, I would say, a little bit redundant with what Vincent detailed much better than that I will do. And I want also to speak about the implementation of the crisis organization and the first action done, and what we'll also do in the future. So some figure that you have already seen on the number of passengers, on the support of the power of aerospace industry, which is roughly 8% of the world economy. But it's clear that if we speak about number of airlines, it's more than 1,400 airlines existing up to now. It implies also that 21,000 commercial aircraft were flying, I would say, and thanks to the logistic support of more than 3,800 commercial airports. When I spoke about the major global employer, 9 million direct jobs and the 66 million jobs globally that I have already shown to you. That were the figure beginning of the pandemic COVID-19 crisis that we know. What happens there, globally speaking? It was a huge downturn. And it was clearly a system economic shock that we all have to notice in the aerospace world. And clearly, there was a number of drop in flight, which was up to 90%, which is absolutely drastic. The domestic flight went down up to 70%. And the airport are managing 90% fewer flight. So it means that this implies a loss of passenger revenue, a loss of airline revenues, of course. Million jobs are at stake. We think that on the 66, 25 are already in danger for the time being. It implies as well a lot of cash burn. It's in billions that this cash burn occurred for the whole supply chain. The supply chain itself, it's at risk. When you say the supply chain, it's not only Airbus supply chain, but it's the global family. We hear now that a lot of airports are ready to close because they don't have any funds, and this is clearly a major issue. And we know that for the time being, 2/3 of the worldwide fleet was grounded. It means that 14,000 aircraft were grounded, so we're not flying anymore. So within that, we have also, and this is a particularity of the aircraft, when an aircraft is grounded, you need to do some activity, some maintenance on it, because it cannot be left without maintenance. So there is also a work which has been performed on this technological tools, and this is costly, and most of the airlines have huge difficulty even to do that kind of maintenance. So there is also a risk on passenger confidence loss, meaning that with the crisis, how are you considered to fly safely if there is some COVID-19 in the cabin? So this had to be explained. What are the measures which were taken by all the airlines in terms of safety for the passenger? So if we consider the immediate impact on Airbus, what are the immediate impact? The first thing was to understand the different impact, and we decide to face reality, meaning to try to understand what's really going on. So to discuss with all the stakeholders and to understand what was the real impact and what it might be on a very short term, so immediate action, and then on the short term and medium term. The impact on the people, yes, it's clear that we took the immediate action to protect the health of people, not only our own people, a member of Airbus, but also to protect the health of passenger, to communicate, to do some measures, and that's something that we will see afterwards. Of course, we had an impact on our financial, so we had to secure financial viability. We need to focus on cash because cash is key, you know that. And this is something on which all the company had to focus. And we also try to imagine how to perform again after, I would say, the main issue have been taken into account and solved for most of them. Of course, we discuss with our customer to understand the impact on our customer, to understand the new demand, and to see what can be done for them in terms of well, help, in terms of financing, in terms of support the crisis, in terms of, for example, postponing some deliveries, etc. So this had impact, of course, not only on the customers, but also on our side. And then also we had a lot of impact on our activity, and it's clear that one of the biggest things that we had to see is how to safeguard the production system and the necessity to resize the company. So once again, on the main measure promoted by the government, these are the one that Airbus has used clearly for the time being. So sanitary measure, I don't insist upon that. It has been already described, and there is a lot of things which have been promoted by the sanitary, by the health authorities in the different countries all over the world, not only in Europe, of course, and everywhere in the world. But what has been done clearly in Europe, and especially in France, in Germany, in UK, in Spain, which are, I would say, the four core and historical country of Airbus, it was a furlough scheme, meaning that the help coming from government to lower the impact of the crisis by allowing people to do some partial unemployment, which will be partially paid by the government. There is, of course, consequences for all the business, for the firm themselves, for the companies themselves, but it's clear that there was a huge help from the government. So also the easy access to loan guaranteed by the state, postponement of tax collection and payment, tax exemption as well, and for the future, support to R&D and Greece business development. This was a point that was very well developed by Vincent, and this is something that we will see for the future. So what has been done? So there is a list of action which have been done immediately. For securing cash, it's clear that we have secured an additional 15 billion credit line for being sure that we will have the opportunity to pay at every moment all that we own for the months to come. When the crisis began, we didn't knew, and this is not still solved, so we didn't know how long this crisis may be, and how long it has to be supported by all the stakeholders. So we decided immediate measures. So on a pure managerial plan, we decided, for example, to withdraw 2019 dividends. So it means that all the shareholders of Airbus participated to the collective effort. We wanted also to pause and restarted the medi-industrial operation and adapted our work standard to the new health requirement. We organized the business continuity of our production system as well, and we established a dedicated supply chain watchtower once again to better anticipate critical situation with supplier. And this is something that was very important for us, to be sure that at any moment, and especially when I would say the crisis will be over, we will be in a position to restart the production tool without any difficulty. And this, of course, is taking care about the supply chain. Well, other measure, proactively reach out to all the relevant government to support our ecosystem and us, and activated measure as soon as decide. This was already what Vincent explained as well. We discussed with airline and lessor to see how to reschedule our delivery plan. We revisited our delivery plan, and we of course we redesign a whole new commercial airplane production planning and release it to the supply chain so that everybody was aware of what was the situation and share the same information at the same moment. This was very important to communicate, to share the point, and to see how to share with everybody the information, and to negotiate as well how to deal with that point. Internally, due to the difficulty, we need also to see with our social partner the implementation of a furlough scheme. We have social rules in France and in Europe, which are quite protective for the people. And it's clear that the role of the social partner is very important in crisis time. And it was necessary to also to discuss with them to adapt the situation, to adapt the rules to the magnitude of the situation. We had also to leverage the labor time and of course to manage with the colleague which stay at home for sanitary reason once again, for health reason once again, and it was of course necessary to adapt the tool to allow work from home when it is possible for a kind of population who can work from home. So this was, I would say, the first action which have been done. And then if we look at what was done for the future, it's clear that when the COVID crisis organization was put in place, there was a 4-phase plan which was elaborated. The first one, the phase 1, which was in the first quarter of 2020, was the immediate response to the pandemic. It means health and safety measure, of course, and the team, the crisis management team in place for the first decision that I've already detailed. The second one, and we are up to now for the end of this phase, is the return to site and the adaptation. So first, to try to recover on a production level which is decreased by 40%, which is enormous when you see the amount which has been shown and which are considered. The second one was to preserve our cash and to find solution on there. And immediately it moves to a logic of rate adaptation to the new rate, resynchronizing the supply chain, meaning as well to adapt the supply chain to the needs, to stop some subcontracting activity, for example, to as well as we reschedule the production plan, maybe to move the reception of some parts, for example, engines, which are the last one to be put on the plane, to move them from our site to the engine manufacturer site, and to deal with the supplier how to see that. And we had also to review our internal cost structure. And this led to launch of a social plan, which at the scale of Airbus was initially supposed to decrease the number of people by 15,000 now with a lot of measures that were taken, this number will be decreased. But we are still on the way to do some adaptation of our workload to the necessity of what we have to do. The third phase is the one which will normally begin in 2021, and we hope that with the vaccine that are supposed to come in 2021, this will occur. We necessitate to step up and to do fixed cost or adaptation, and this is, I would say, a midterm journey that we are initiating, and we also transform the buy to make perimeter of Airbus, and we want also to enforce in-class industry standard, best-in-class industry standard, and this is something that I will just detail after. Recovery, we hope that for our industry, with the fact that airline will begin to reoperate again, with the fact that it's a necessity to travel, and we see that internally in Asia, in some part of Asia, especially internally in China, there is a recovery of domestic flight. This may help, of course, all the aerospace world to recover quite rapidly, even if we are quite sure that the recovery of long-range traffic will recover a little bit later. Long-range traffic means international flights will be a little bit longer to begin or to recover and to taken back on a normal stage and to reach the level of 2019. In a conclusion, well, for the timing, the market environment is still below expectation. We know that a lot of countries are closed or are limiting their link with the other countries. So this is clearly something which is a break to the recovery. We need also to restore the passenger confidence in the safety of the air travel. So to restore the passenger confidence means to give the opportunity to have a sustaining demand for air travel. And we need as well, and we are convinced about that in Airbus, that the adaptation is mandatory, immediate, and this is what has been done with the maintain or the improvement of safety measure, and we follow, of course, all the rules that are applied everywhere around the world. And we also launch the optimization of the production rate and the preservation of the supply chain. This is our ongoing short-term worrying for the time being. And for the long term, we are convinced that it's absolutely necessary, once we will have reshaped the company, that it's absolutely necessary to invest in R&D and in innovation. And this linked to what has been promoted by the different government in terms of support to R&D, support to innovation, especially green measures and all that that we are doing for the decarbonation of the aerospace world, globally speaking, is very, very important for us. So in conclusion, what we should say, and that's a motto that we have in Airbus, this crisis is clearly a short-term pain for a long-term gain. So we don't know what will really be the long term, but we are convinced that in the next 4 or 5 years we will see a lot of improvement, and that the situation we will have recovered at that stage.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jill. Okay.
You're welcome.
So I think Dewi's gonna going to mediate the questions. Quite a few questions have come in over the last hour. Thank you so much to everyone who's been asking questions, both to Louise and Gilles. So I'll let you mediate that, Joey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Novi. Okay, we start the Q&A session where I should scroll up there. Yeah, question for Louise. Okay, first from Maseng Zhu. Yeah, Mr. Maseng Zhu. Talking about the first slide that Louise presented, does operating 25 to 30% below capacity refer to production or overall economy? Okay, Louise, you can directly.
I think it was the overall economy that was referenced there, because of course it's not just the productive economy, but also services and other aspects that were also well below capacity.
Okay, thank you. So we move to the next question from Gigi from Indonesia. In bullet points, so it's refer also to your slides, what are those identified opportunities for reorienting the economy toward more sustainable models? Will that be applicable for Indonesia as well?
Well, there's all sorts of different elements to reorientating the economy towards more sustainable models, some of which have been referred to by the other two speakers. So I'll talk a little bit about the implications for Indonesia, which I think maybe are more interesting for the audience. There's a couple of implications for this sort of reorientation towards more strategic business models in Indonesia. Some opportunities and potentially some threats. In terms of opportunities, what Vincent was talking about the need to diversify sources and to have a more resilient supply chain by diversification does pose some opportunities for basically countries that are on China, in a sense. Like the China +1 supply strategy has been discussed for some time, but now we're going to be at a context of China plus several. If we want to really have resilient supply chains that can continue to supply goods, even when one or two countries are facing difficulties of one kind or another. So Indonesia has capacity in many different industries that could potentially be an opportunity for them to be an alternative to the key big suppliers, China, India, in certain sectors. The risks for Indonesia are related to what Vincent already referred to in terms of the relatively high dependence on fossil fuel exports. There's also risks in relation to palm oil, because there is increasing concern about the interaction between palm oil production and the destruction of forest. So Europe would be looking in its build back better, more sustainable economy of the future to be reducing clearly its dependence on fossil fuels, and also to be looking more carefully at supply chains that supply European production and ensure that along those supply chains, they can be sure that the inputs are sustainable. And these questions of deforestation, I think, will inevitably become more important to European companies. So there are some positive sides. There's also some potential threats. And I think European companies will be looking to new suppliers, but also will increasingly be looking along their supply chain at the long-term sustainability of aspects of that supply chain.
Thank you. That's exactly, yeah. Okay, Pak Gigi?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you so much for the answer, Lois.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's the one that I think we need more, yeah, for the alternative energy to reduce the dependence. Okay, so we continue to Denny Abdurrahman, also from Indonesia. Which should take precedence, health interests or economic interests? and how to manage these two interests which often conflict with the implementation. Health interest and economic.
This is the $50 trillion question, of course.
Oh my God.
And if I had an answer, I think I'd be a prime minister or president of an important country. I honestly, I don't envy at all politicians at the moment trying to make these extremely difficult choices. And different countries have taken slightly different approaches. And those who have tried to keep their economies as open as possible have been heavily criticized because inevitably they have higher rates of death and illness. And those that have locked down have been heavily criticized for the negative impact of that lockdown on the economy. What's clear is that you can't have a healthy economy if the people within it are sick. And that you can rebuild economies, but you can't rebuild lives. And so for many European governments, the priority has been on saving lives rather than saving the economy, and keeping the economy on life support through various government policies, which we've talked about, rather than sacrificing lives. But it's a very difficult challenge, and it's very difficult to decide when to reopen, and inevitably the risks will increase and people will probably die. And it's an extremely, extremely complicated political question, for which there is no right answer, I think. But Europe is certainly erring on the side of saving lives as opposed to saving the economy and keeping the economy going through support.
Okay. Yeah, as we face the same problem here, whether to have open or half lockdown or fully lockdown, the implementation is the same difficult, the three options.
And the answer for Indonesia has been what?
It's different from every provinces. Some of us make a partially lockdown, which is talking about 50% of going to the office, but schools is definitely closed. But all the restaurants, they have 50 capacity, and there's a transport, airlines, partially locked down, and we keep online on going up because people keep ordering food through online and goods through online as well. Yeah. Okay. So next question from Mr. Iman Simon from Indonesia as well. How do you look based on EU policy of the supply chain amongst EU countries in the uncertain circumstances of the global economic recovery? Okay, you still unmute.
Sorry, could you just repeat the question again? I can't see it in front of me, so.
Okay. How do you look based on the European Union policy of the supply chain amongst the European countries in the uncertain circumstances of the global economic recovery?
Okay.
The point of view of the EU.
This question is the one I was discussing a bit in the last few minutes of my presentation, really. For the European governments, and Vincent talked about it as well, I think a key concern is this question of supply chain resilience. Realistically, governments are not the people who manage the supply chains and make them more resilient. Companies are. And so the role of the private sector and how they manage the resilience of their supply chain is absolutely key. But of course, governments can encourage certain industries, they can provide support for research going forward, and they can provide long-term strategic orientations. It's not yet clear exactly how this resilience can be created, and it's reassuring from Vincent to hear him say that we want to diversify supply chains rather than renationalize them. I think that's probably the right way to go. And as I say, it provides some opportunities for non-traditional suppliers to enter new supply chains. But it will be a difficult transition, I think, in several supply chains to make them more resilient and less dependent on certain very big country suppliers.
Okay, so it's still also a long journey, yeah, to find what is exactly a diversity for the supply chain resources and so on, because yeah, we don't know where the industries will go as well.
Indeed,
Okay,
it's a huge level of uncertainty, as the question indicated.
Yeah, agree. Okay, next question from Isabella Octora. Ms. Louise, related to the short-term policy response, would you kindly please inform about the specific support of government for Europe for small medium enterprises during this pandemic, maybe from the financial or marketing strategic point of view? Thank you for sharing.
I think to a large extent that question was answered by Vincent, because what the French government has been doing is very similar to what other governments have been doing. So I think maybe it's better to go directly to Gilles' questions, because I think some of those questions were posed before Vincent provided, and Gilles indeed provided quite a lot of details about government support.
Okay, yes, it's true. Okay, well, we move to the question for Gilles, where this come from Luis. Okay, Gilles, has there been a difference between the government short and medium term response in the different countries where you operate? Airbus operate?
Well, the answer
Sorry,
is...
that's a very big question.
The answer is obviously yes, because if we just take one example, which is the location of our final assembly line. We have a final assembly line in Europe, of course, in Germany and France, but we also have assembly line in China, and assembly line in the US and in Canada as well for the 220. So it's clear that due to the different step of the crisis and the different sensibility from all the government to the crisis, the measures were totally different, just on this single example. But as we are located, say, most of the 5 continents, so it's clear that the answer was different. We were compelled to follow this rule, obviously, and we did it. But for example, we had a subsidiary in Singapore, on which, with the strict regulation that were taken by the Singapore authority, people couldn't move out of Singapore, or when they could, there was a period of I would say a quarantine period for 2 weeks when you leave, when you come back, etc. So it was of course a little bit complicated, but yes, we had to consider that, and it was part of the difficulty that we encountered with this crisis. And when I say we as Airbus, it's only a partial example of what happens to the global economy business, and especially in the aerospace world.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for Gilles. And the next question is also for Gilles from Richie. So Airbus is an international pioneer in the aerospace sector. So what direction is Airbus moving towards in terms of aero engineering? And also what Airbus will focus on expanding its business? It was also mentioned that Airbus is planning to resize or adapt the business in the face of the pandemics. And how will this be done without sacrificing or letting go the workforce, or furlough alone is enough? Thank you. It's a lot of questions.
So this question is very interesting, because a part of the answer is already in the question. Okay. It's clear that we will use all the tools that in our hands for adapting our company. First of all, on a short-term basis, and this will be clearly furlough. On a medium term, which will be also to adapt the skills and the competencies of our people. So meaning maybe to train people on some new direction as well. It was spoken as well about digitalization this morning. It's clear that digitalization is key for us as well, for the consumption of plane, for managing the company as well. Even on some capability to also to produce the different parts. So this is something that that is permanently in our heads. But we want also to do a lot of re-engineering of our processes, and also to contribute to the decarbonization of this industry, and this is something which is very important for us as well. We want still, and that was one of my conclusion, to be best in class and the industry standard. It's clear that the environmental rules are evolving, the customer focus is also evolving, and we need to be part of this. And this is clearly a direction that we have already seen. We have a program which is called the Zero Emission Aircraft Program, and it's clear that we are in mind to have a first operation plane in 2035 operated by Airbus on this topic.
Very interesting. Thank you, Gilles. So this next question from Pak Iman Simon again. So this is related also to customers, where COVID-19 pandemic has hit most airlines industries and big customers of Airbus, such as Singapore Airlines, Qantas, Garuda, Indonesia, and Cathay, and etc. And how Airbus would support strategically these prominent customers, regardless this turmoil towards industry. And the second one, as every country could not stand or get out from the pandemic by itself, and many fallen airlines would still come in the next uncertainty, would Airbus perhaps could promote the connectivity of the airline ecosystem across countries? For example, join operating airlines from many countries, which financed by multi-financial institution. Okay, I hope it's not too long.
So first of all,
Vanessa,
sorry.
Yeah. Okay. You can answer it.
Yeah. Okay, so the question is very interesting as well, and I think that you have very motivated people around this table. No, thanks a lot for this. Yes, this is important. That first of all we have a huge negotiation with the airlines, the lessors as well, because you know that roughly 40% of the worldwide fleet is not in the hand of the airline, but in the hand of lessors who rent the plane to the different airlines, and they are a huge part of the deal as well. So we are in close discussion with them to help the company to survive in this huge crisis. You spoke about Singapore Airlines. Singapore Airlines has decreased the number of flights by more than 70%. Well, it's clear that Singapore Airlines doesn't have a domestic flight due to the size of Singapore itself. So it's clear that it was more, I would say, long or medium or long range flight. So it's clear that we discuss with all the company to all of them, including refinancing, including the postponement of deliveries, including the new reshuffling of the different contracts that have been put in place, and that is negotiated on a side-by-side cases with all the stakeholders, even in some case with the government or the banking system as well. So it's clear that in that case, it's the interest of Airbus to be sure that the customer will still exist and will fly again, and will be able to increase their capability and their capacity as well to buy new planes and to reschedule their flight.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. So next question from Priska, and similar with Gembong Baskoro, where the question is concerns about when do you think that that job opportunities will recover for the aeronautic industry, especially in Airbus? And yeah, this is the question. Perhaps when the pandemic will over. Okay.
I will say exactly the same thing than Louise 2 or 3 questions before. Should I know the answer, I will be
yeah, you
I
will
think
be
very no. I have a crystal ball on my desk, and sometime I have a look to my crystal ball. No, all joking apart, I think it's important that we are quite optimistic, and then within 3-4 years time, we will be in better conditions. This is clearly linked, and this something also that was in the previous question. As long as you have a vaccine and that people get confident in the fact that they can travel safely, I think that the things and the economy globally will restart. Will restart quite clearly, quite quite normally, I would say. So this is important. This is important. Yes, that's the people are confident in the fact that they can travel safely.
Okay, so thank you. So this related to question from Miss Henny Suparjono. She asked that what is Airbus' effort to convince the public, that traveling is safe and healthy by using aircraft, because face-to-face meetings is important in the business, and entrepreneurs are still not 100 confident in online meetings dealing with clients or partners. And if there is a strategy from Airbus to address this issue to convince people to travel normally, please.
Okay. So first of all, I must say that I share that point, and that even if it's convenient to have this remote access, it's clear that it's sometimes easier and more obvious to have the face-to-face meeting. Yes. So what Airbus is dealing. First of all, you have to know that in a plane, the air is extracted, and the risk of transfer of viruses in the air cabin is very low, very low, and this has not been, I would say, communicated enough. But this is something that we have done a lot of studies here, and this is a real help for the airline to know that. After that, there are health policy which are done by each airline, and which are under their responsibility, which is to clean the plane with all the safety measure that we know in terms of cleaning, and also in terms of protection with a mask, with the hydraulic gel, etc. So it's clear that we have to follow that. Including the places where the plane are met, meaning in the airports, where all the structure has to be adapted as well as everywhere in the world, to be sure that there is no possibility to get the virus with the contact of other people. So these are the main things on which we are working, of course, with the health authorities and with the airline, of course.
Okay, very good pointing from the airline industry. Okay, last from the Nabila Aulia to Mr. Merrick. Will the crisis highlight obsolete industry structures and cause the bubble of huge aircraft order books in the future? And how do you sustain production in a constrained environment that requires social distancing? Please, Jill.
Social distancing, is a fact. The industrial measures which were taken were, of course, quite hard to put in place, but we had some opportunities for the production line, meaning to split the team in two, for example, or to avoid and to be sure that this restriction measure has been taken on the different production site, whatever the type of production is. Okay. A part of that, the impact on Airbus will be very important, and it's clear that the market study that we produce every year, which is called the Global Market Forecast, will take into account new design, new trends, new, I would say, social environment trends for that, and the volunteer of the people to travel will be taken into account, and this may lead to maybe, I don't know, I don't have the result for the time being, to significant change in the forecasts that we have in mind. When I spoke about the 40,000 plane for the next 20 years, this is a global, and this is not for Airbus itself, and this is the global request from all the aircraft manufacturer, Boeing, Comac, etc. These might be different in the future after all the component and all the elements which are leading to our forecast will be taken into account and will be refocused with the experience of this COVID crisis.
Okay, thank you very much, Jill. Okay, last question I have for Luis. Question from Jitika Raman. Dr. Kuran mentioned that COVID-related import-export restriction may have been an excuse to restrict international trade, even in non-sensitive sectors such as concrete. And also that the US has been lukewarm about institutions like WTO for some years. Has the pandemic been a catalyst for longer-term protectionism worldwide? With regards to the policy decision made, to what extent do they stem from a genuine desire to have resilient value chains? And to what extent do they stem from hostility to globalization more broadly? This is a PhD question. Please,
Absolutely, Gitika. I think you should do a PhD on this because obviously you've understood the extent of the question. It's a huge question, indeed. To break it down into little bits that might be useful. Definitely, it was an excuse for certain countries to impose measures that they had either imposed before or had talked about imposing before, but hadn't done for a variety of reasons, usually because they've been threatened by larger countries to take retaliatory measures. So the used clothing is a good example. Several African countries have tried to impose bans on this before and have been put under pressure by the exporters, which are usually developed countries, to not do that. And then during the pandemic, they banned used clothing. Used clothing is actually quite a political topic in several countries. Cement and timber, very strange choices clearly related to protecting local industry. And I think the governments have been quite clear in their local communication that this is about protecting local industry. And that, of course, has a negative impact on the extent to which the usual trading rules are considered to be reliable and constant. The US non-engagement in WTO, as its non-engagement in other multilateral institutions, most notably the WHO, is problematic, of course. It has fragilized the institution. And as I said, the new administration is looking much more positive on that. But some of the criticisms of globalization, of global value chains, of the sustainability of those chains have not gone away because Trump is hopefully leaving the White House. I think it's these criticisms and worries about the sustainability of global production will continue. And how exactly that pans out in terms of flexibilities within global trading rules to restrict more international trade in less sustainable products, these kind of issues will come up in Geneva. There'll be some very interesting discussions, I'm sure. Any of you who are interested in international politics, I think the next few years will be a very interesting time in the multilateral system as governments seek to find this balance between openness and protecting their people, their industries, and their value chains. So I have no answers, but I have a lot of questions.
So the question triggers more questions. Okay, thank you very much, Luis. Okay, so we will open one more question. Yes, Naomi, for one more question for the panelists here from Luis and Jill. Is there any question? You can raise hand. No? No more question? Are you sure, audience? This is a very rare opportunity. Okay, no more question. Okay, I think we arrived to the end of the session, ladies and gentlemen, right? So can we give a big applause to our speaker?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gilles.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gilles and Luis. Thank you, Vincent, as well. You already left. Okay, Naomi. So we close this session. And so let me wrap up a little bit about our discussion. So it was obvious that this pandemic is a question. Yeah, it's very uncertain moment, and every country is working hard to find the better solution in terms of job opportunities, and also the finance of funding for the unemployed person, and also the industry also struggle for looking a better solution and alternative energies, better sustainable supply chain, and so on. And obviously we cannot work alone on this side.
Clear.
Okay, yeah. So I think that would be the closing from me.
Thank you very much, Dewi, and thank you to all of our speakers today. We're really delighted that you were able to join us and give us such interesting and in-depth knowledge. Thank you to everyone who asked questions and for being such patient listeners. We have made it to almost 2.5 hours, so it was very intense. But thank you to everyone. The recording, we have recorded it, so if anybody wasn't able to catch everything, please send us an email. We'll put the email address in the chat, and then you can contact us, or if you have any further questions that you weren't able to ask, you can also feel free to drop those questions through to us. Everyone at BINUS, well, it's been a delight to host you here at TBS, and please stay in touch. If you ever make it to Toulouse, Paris, Barcelona, or Casablanca, then please let us know. We'll be happy to welcome you, and we hope one day we'll be able to make it over to BINUS when Airbus will be able to fly us there.
Yes,
we hope so.
Looking forward to it. To it.
Yeah.
So we also hope for that immersion program, Naomi. Yeah, so we can see you maybe next year or on the year after. Okay.
We hope very much to welcome your students when they can make it over here too.
Yeah. Okay.
So
okay. Thank you very much. Stay safe, everyone. Stay healthy. See you in our next webinar. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks very much, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bu Dewi.
Thanks.
Everybody.
Thank you, Bu Dewi.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to give me the opportunity to participate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Naomi, Louis, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Okay, let me leave Naomi. See you again. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Dewi. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.